What's up, YouTube? I am the Vanilla Nerd, and today I want to review Avatar the Last Airbender. I just had a very fun rewatch of the show, and so I'm looking forward to talking about it. I know I'm very late to the show talking about this. This show has spawned a spin-off show, a movie, a Netflix TV series, and soon there's going to be a third sequel show, as well as some other plans in the works and stuff. But I've never been known to be timely on this channel, so it's par for the course. As always, I will give an obligatory spoiler warning. There will be heavy spoilers for all seasons. This is just kind of a general overview. I plan not to go too deep into any of the characters or things, just kind of give overall thoughts and some big broad strokes of why I liked this series and what maybe a few things I didn't like about the series. So yeah. Anyway, you've been warned. Spoilers heading in. Okay, so Avatar the Last Airbender is one of the greatest shows of all time, and it's still beloved today, despite being 20 plus years old and stuff, at least when the first episode aired and stuff. For me, it's up there with my favorite shows of all time. Things like Star Wars The Clone Wars, Young Justice, the DC animated universe, whether it's Superman the animated series, Batman the animated series, Justice League, you name it, I love it from that universe. And the thing is I think this show stands apart from all of those shows in one key way that I really love, and that is that it's a complete full story across all 3 seasons, and I just love that. You see, my biggest problem with watching television as compared to watching a movie is that television very rarely tells a full and complete story. More often than not, it feels like they're trying super hard to justify the next season. So they put up a bunch of cliffhangers, a bunch of plot hooks to get people excited, and then whichever ones get like the most popularity or whatever are the ones that the show follows through on. Occasionally they follow through on plot hooks that jive with the actors or the directors really well, and kudos to them for doing that. But most of the time they're just focused on getting to that next season, of making this season as good as it can be, and then hopefully justifying the need for another season. A lot of these shows even have a conclusory season when they know it's their very last one, but even then, all they're doing is tying up the plot hooks that, again, are most popular, not everything in the show. And that's why, while I like those kinds of shows, I can enjoy those, they will never be as good as Avatar. And it's something that movies have a great advantage over, because most movies are still trying to just make a good, solid movie. Yes, in today's atmosphere and climate with the MCU and stuff, there is a greater desire to sell sequels, to promote a sequel movie in the future, but it's still not quite as bad as like television and stuff. And there are still plenty of movies that aren't trying to make a sequel, they're just trying to tell a good story over the course of 2 hours, and I love those movies, and I think they're some of the best movies out there. Avatar, I feel like, truly takes advantage of having the long form storytelling and the fact that they're trying to tell a full and complete story. And that's what I love about Avatar the Last Airbender. I mean, my favorite example of this is the fact that at the end of the series, the only last major question we have is where is Zuko's mother? Like, he asks that 2 minutes before the final shot of the whole show, and so we're all left wondering what happened with that. And I know that since then they have made a comic that explains that, and good for the creators. I'm glad they were able to tell that story, at least in some format. But ultimately, like, that's really the only question. Every other character has had a satisfying and complete arc. Sokka learned to be a leader. Katara learned to be a great waterbender. Aang learned to be a great avatar. Zuko got his redemption. Iroh and Toph never really needed to change. They're awesome. They're great. And all of these characters were just very satisfyingly done and well written, and not only that, but the plot all came together nicely. There aren't huge questions like, hey, what happened to this, what happened to that, what all is going on here? And that's not something I can say about most TV shows. You know, most TV shows, you get to the end of the series, it's like, that's cool, but I am still curious about that planet, or I'm still curious about that species, or I'm still curious about that character, what's going on with them and stuff. But really, with Avatar the Last Airbender, the only question you're really left with is, what happened to Zuko's mother? I suppose you could argue that there's a question over Jet, And maybe some people want to see Toph and her reconciliation with her parents and a couple of other things. And I guess to that point, there's something to be said that with Avatar the Last Airbender, it's not to say that the world is closed off. There is still more to explore in the world. It is interesting to think about what happens in the future. What does the new world order look like now that the four nations are back to being four nations again? What did the rest of these characters go on to do in their adult years? That's very exciting to think about. And I know a lot of those questions were answered in Legend of Korra, and we'll get to that in a second. But the point is this story doesn't saying there's a complete story doesn't mean that there's nothing left to tell in the universe of Avatar. It's actually a testament to how good the story is, that it is still exciting to live in this world. It is still something where you want to see more stories told in this universe. That's absolutely something we all want. But that being said, I don't get to the end of Avatar and I'm thinking, man, I wish I had just had 2 or 3 more episodes to explain X, Y, or Z. I really don't. I think it ended right where it needed to end, and I think it was very satisfying and very, very fun. So that pretty much wraps up my feelings around the plot. I guess to go a little more specific, but still broad strokes, I did really appreciate the progression of Aang learning each of the bending elements. That was a really fun plot device to see that. I did really appreciate how Zuko was used in the plot. I mean, it's not a hot take to say that Zuko has the best redemption arc out of virtually any character in all of fiction, because he actually works hard to redeem himself. He actually gets punished for his crimes and stuff, and there's all this other stuff. But the thing is with Zuko, I really appreciated that as soon as he got boring as a villain, he was really starting to get taxing at the end of season 1, he got taken out of the action. Most of season 2, he's separated from the main conflict. Yes, he shows up again in the chase and at the end in Ba Sing Se, but most of his on-screen time is spent away from the main cast of characters and stuff, and I really, really like that. Obviously, I mean, everyone loves Zuko, so yeah, they did a great job. Continuing on with the plot, I will simply say that I really appreciate that they built up to these big, epic action scenes quite appropriately. The big attack on the Water Nation was a great way to end the season 1. The big attack with the drill was a great mid-season finale for season 2, but I like how the finale of season 2 was a lot more personal. It was just a few characters involved: Azula, Zuko, and Katara. Toph and Sokka were off in the background. And it was, very much mirrored the fact that a coup took down the Earth Kingdom, not a big invasion. And in that, it mirrored that by saying there's not a big battle, it's just a smaller battle between these characters. Although I still love the battle at Crossroads of Destiny and stuff. Fantastic. And stuff. And then, of course, season 3 had the big invasion on the Day of Black Sun, which was such an exciting, fun episode. It really felt like a battle of benders, which was awesome. But of course, the bigger and more important battle was Sozin's Comet, that wonderful and glorious 4-parter to the series. So jumping over to characters, I've kind of talked specifically about Zuko enough that that's pretty much all I want to talk about in specifics. But on a broader scale, encompassing all characters, what I think is really special about Avatar the Last Airbender is that all of the characters are so compelling and likable. That is so impressive because usually in most TV shows, they have a large ensemble cast and 1 or 2 of the characters I really don't like. They'll have episodes dedicated to that character, and I just don't care about that character. It just doesn't work for me, and those are the episodes I usually skip on rewatches and stuff. But not so with Avatar. With The Last Airbender, every single character is enjoyable and entertaining. And I just am compelled by each one of them. I think they're all great and well-crafted characters, and I never mind spending an episode focusing on 1 or 2 of them. It just works so well. Now, to be fair, people are going to have their favorites. Zuko and Iroh usually jump to the top of most people's lists. I know Katara is kind of lower for a lot of other people. And that's okay. I'm not saying you can't have those favorites. But it still is powerful to me that it's like, all of these characters are really enjoyable and entertaining, and none of them make me just roll my eyes and hate when they're on screen. And that is something that is absolutely impressive, and it's one of the reasons that Avatar is one of my favorite series of all time. And let's not leave out the villains. The show did a fantastic job with the villains. I mean, Zuko was a villain for most of the show, and them telling his redemption and making us sympathize with him was so well done, so excellent. On top of that, Azula is a fantastic villain. The fact that she's capable and a firebending prodigy, and every time she comes on screen, you're worried and terrified and stuff, is great. The fact that she eventually breaks down after her friends leave her and she realizes she doesn't have as much control as she thought she did, and she goes on this crazy thing where she banishes everyone that actually is friends with her and stuff, is just, it's so sad and heartbreaking to see. On top of all of that, Fire Lord Ozai, perfect evil villain. You know, he's evil for the sake of being evil. He wants to rule the world, and he doesn't care how he has to do to get that. They set that up super early in the storm where he burns his son's eye just for speaking out. And he continues to be a terrible father throughout the entire series. Sure, he's not the most deep villain ever. He's not someone like Azula or Zuko, but that doesn't matter. He doesn't need to be. He's still a terrifying force and extremely powerful. Like, his firebending at the end of the series, although it's augmented by Sozin's Comet, is some of the coolest firebending ever put to screen, which is just so good. So good. And I'll give a brief shout out to Admiral Zhao. He's hilarious. And also well done. Fits that poll. And finally, I want to end this review talking about perhaps Avatar's greatest strength, and that is the setting. The setting is beautifully simple. You take the four elements from lore, from myth, fire, air, earth, water, and you throw them together to make a world where those are what define the four nations of this world, four major nations, and what define the magic system of this world. And I know, according to the creators, it's not strictly speaking magic. I finally realized why some people feel this way, have different opinions on what is magic and what is not. I think the big difference is, like, some people define magic as stuff that is unexplainable, and therefore Avatar does not count as magic because it is explainable. If you master a martial art form, you are able to telekinetically move elements that fall under different categories. Thus and so, it is not magic. However, I define magic as anything that is not physically possible in our real world and stuff. So therefore, this is magic because it's not physically possible in our real world. And yes, to those questioning, a lot of sci-fi I consider magic because it's not physically possible in our world, in our real world. I know technically it's defined as science and stuff, and okay, sure, sci-fi fans, be happy with that. And yes, there's a difference between how hard the magic system is versus how soft the magic system is, and how prevalent the magic system is versus how not prevalent it is. I don't want to get into all that. The point is, for my purposes, it is magic. I know there's more to it than that. End of story. But getting back on track, I love how each nation has its element, and they each kind of reside in an area where their element is strongest. You know, Fire Nation on volcanoes, Water Nation in the North and South Pole where they're surrounded by ice, Earth Nation on the largest continent in the world where, of course, there's the most Earth and stuff. But when I say that this is simple, I don't want to take away from the hard work that the creators did to align these nations with real world cultures. I know that the Earth Kingdom took a lot of inspiration from Chinese culture. I know the Fire Nation took a lot of inspiration from Japanese culture, and I know there's cultures that are associated with Water Tribe and Air Nomads. I don't know those off the top of my head, and I don't care to look them up for this review. Point is, they went to that effort, and not only that, with the bending styles, they went to different martial arts styles and applied them to those characters and stuff. Not characters, to those bending forms and stuff, which is just another step of why this world feels so rich and important and good. And so The world building is just absolutely fantastic. But the reason I say it's simple isn't because that was a lot of simple work on the behalf of the creators. No, they had to do a lot of hard work in the background to bring that to the forefront. But it's beautifully simplistic for us as the audience to understand. It's like, oh, they're all broken up into nations. They have colors associated with those nations. They have outfits and styles and bending forms associated with all of these things. They have architecture associated with all these things. A lot of it goes unnoticed by us, the audience, but we do notice it subconsciously and are able to just subconsciously say, this feels Earth Kingdom, or this feels Fire Nation to me, and that's all true. And so it works so, so well, and I love it so much. On top of that, I will say that they don't allow themselves to be stuck rigidly to these nations and formats. We learn about benders, different kinds of benders of these elements that don't really exist in any one nation. Swamp benders are found in the Earth Nation, and yet they're water benders, 100%. Sand benders are found in the deserts of the Earth Nation, and yes, they're earthbenders, but they're not quite earthbenders. They've learned how to bend sand, not earth, naturally, and stuff. And there's other examples and stuff. So it's just very, very exciting and creates for a rich, wonderful world, which I very much enjoy. Another thing I want to mention about the setting is how well it works with the plot, because ultimately we know each season of the show is called Water, Earth, and Fire, and relates to the bending element that Aang is learning, but it also relates to what culture he's visiting. In season 1, Water, they go to both water tribes, and we see a lot of that. In season 2, we go to Ba Sing Se, the Earth Kingdom capital, and through the eyes of Zuko, we see a lot of what the little villages of the Earth Kingdom look like and stuff. In season 3, Fire, we have the kids go undercover in the Fire Nation, and we get to see a lot of what the Fire Nation looks like, what it looks like for the everyday person. As well as through the eyes of Zuko, again, we see what the royal palace life looks like for the Fire Nation. And I really like that about the setting, that they made sure to explore each of those cultures very, very well. And so that was very, very exciting. I really liked that about the setting. But lastly, outside of the four nations, outside of the elements and the bending and all of that good stuff, the thing that I love about Avatar is that it also sets the story in a period of modernization. The people were very kind of medieval style. Swords and bows and arrows are still a effective form of weapons and stuff. But you see that modernization happening. The Fire Nation has developed the steam engine, which makes sense. They're the Fire Nation. And so they have a technological advantage over the other nations, which explains why they've been able to carry on this war for 100 years and stuff. Totally makes sense. And so the Fire Nation is... And so that modernization is very cool to see how it affects the rest of the world, whether it's the drill or the airships or whatever. It's just, that's really cool to see. Now, it's not like the other nations don't have some modernization happening. The Earth Kingdom, through the use of benders, has made a subway system effective and useful. The Water Tribe uses canal locks and stuff to create a thriving community in the Northern Water Tribe. And there's some other things like that. But it's really cool to see kind of that change, this world on the verge of change. How does that look? And stuff. And there definitely are some elements of bending versus technology, and what does that look like and stuff. So I really like that. Obviously, that's more explored in The Legend of Korra, if you've seen that show, but that's beside the point. The point is, Avatar the Last Airbender, I really like that they set it in this time period where you have a rise of technology and modernization. I think that adds an extra element to The Last Airbender that just makes it that much better. Lastly, what I want to say is that the creators paid attention to the details. This show has so many hidden details that pop up and are well done that I just love so much. There's so many, too many to count, but two of my favorites that I don't hear talked about enough are, one is the connection between the chakras and Aang's ability to get and re-enter the Avatar state. So famously, Azuka shocks him with lightning, stops him from ever entering the Avatar state. He says his chakras are locked. But where that shock is on the base of his back is the base of the spine, which also happens to be where Guru Patik said is the location of the Earth chakra. And what happens to get Aang to re-enter the Avatar state? A piece of rock stabs him in his spine. Literally, Earth was used to unlock his Earth chakra and allow Aang to re-enter the Avatar state, which I just love and think is so cool. It makes it a lot less Deus Ex Machina for him to be able to just enter the Avatar state and be powerful. So that was really cool. Another hidden detail that I absolutely love is the fact that he inadvertently follows all of the advice of the past avatars in Sozin's Comet. Now, famously at the end of Sozin's Comet, or not the end, in the second episode of Sozin's Comet, Part 2, he talks to all of his past lives, or at least the last 4. One from each of the nations. They each give him some advice. Roku says, be decisive. Kyoshi says, only justice will bring peace. Koro, the water tribe dude, says, actively shape your own destiny and the destiny of the world. And Yang Chen, the other airbender, says, do whatever it takes to protect the world. And he takes this to mean, I guess I have no choice. I have to kill the Fire Lord. He famously says that. But he inadvertently follows all of this advice in his takedown of the Fire Lord. You know, he is decisive. He does bring justice to Fire Lord Ozai by taking away his bending. What must be a monumental, traumatizing event for anyone. Imagine just losing that, a big part of yourself and identity. Koro says actively shape your own destiny and the destiny of the world. He chooses not to kill Ozai. He chooses to shape his own destiny, and it changes the destiny of the world because now the Avatar can take away the bending of people who are being problem people. Now, obviously, this doesn't exactly work for non-benders, but we do see him take away the bending of someone again in the Legend of Korra. So he continues to use this practice to shape the destiny of the world. And then Yang Chen says, do whatever it takes to protect the world. And Aang is literally willing to sacrifice himself. He lays it all out on the table to take away the bending of Ozai. The lion turtle says, in order to manipulate the energy of someone else, your soul must be unmanipulated. Your heart must be pure and all of that goodness. So he's willing to do whatever it takes to protect the world. Aang follows all their advice, even though he doesn't kill Fire Lord Ozai. And I just absolutely love that about that final scene and that final showdown and stuff. So, in the end, Avatar the Last Airbender is just so cool. And so I guess here's where I'll give my final thoughts. The point is with Avatar is it really has it all. It has an excellent plot. It has excellent characters. It has an excellent setting, which is just beautiful across the board. On top of that, they throw in a backdrop of modernization and its effect on the rest of the world, which is great. It explores themes, which I really didn't talk about here, but I don't really mind. The point is it explores some really powerful themes about relying on your friends, redemption, found family, etc., etc. It's a great show. We all know that, and there's not much more I can say to add to the conversation, but I am glad I got to say my piece here in this review. And so, in the end, I'll just say, I love Avatar the Last Airbender. It is one of my favorite shows, and it's probably the most complete and whole show that I know out of any of the shows in the world. And that's how I'm going to end. It's a complete, excellent show.